In a shocking announcement earlier today, Naz Al-Ataha, who is the head of LoL Esports at Riot Games, announced that she is going to be leaving the company. She has been on sabbatical since February, I believe, or at least like the beginning of the year, and announced that upon returning from her sabbatical, she has made the choice to leave the company, which, hey, pretty baller move if you ask me. I had a similar thing happen with a boss of mine at Peloton. This happened after I left the company, but she was pregnant, went on maternity leave for 6 months as granted by the company, literally came back, and the day she returned, she handed in her resignation. Found a better job with better pay, but maximized out on the benefits that she was able to get. And oh my God, is it a baller move. So hey, to Naz, you took your sabbatical. I'm not sure whether the choice was there like preemptively to leave or whether this was a decision that came afterwards. Regardless, baller. But it leaves us with a massive, massive change in a time where, quite honestly, you do not want to see change. We have sweeping changes coming to the LoL esports ecosystem, which we will get into in a little bit in this video. But first, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I put out consistent LoL esports content. Be sure to drop a subscribe down below and put in the comments, what do you think has been the best and worst moments of the last 3 years of League of Legends esports? Why 3 years? Because that's whenever this particular leadership group was established. In case you need a refresher, at the very top you have John Needham, who is the head of esports at Riot Games. He oversees both Valorant and League of Legends, and assumedly any other titles that come out. They all end up reporting to him, but right underneath him is his crew of people that head the individual games. And Naz was the leader of League of Legends. Has been since 2021 after Worlds. Her job is realistically to fight for the best interest of LoL esports and put us in a direction going forward that is good and sustainable, especially in a world where she is now competing against the head of Valorant. And while you can say, oh, they're all working together in tandem, and yes, to a certain extent they are, they have a limited number of resources, a limited amount of people, and a limited amount of time. Yes, they were competing against each other. So let's look back at that tenure. I asked some people on Twitter, what have been the best moments of the last 3 years? And the general consensus is it's kind of overwhelmingly negative. Not even taking into account the business side. We're just going to look at like the esport itself. We have seen the reduction of in-person events significantly since 2021 as we were coming out of COVID. 2021 by all means was like not an easy time in LoL esports as they were trying to bring things back. It didn't fully work as COVID kept shutting stuff down. Worlds was supposed to be in China that year. It got pivoted over to what was it? It was Reykjavik, again, the same place that they held MSI, because they couldn't get it to work in person. So by all means, while 2022 was considered a successful year in League of Legends, the question is whether leadership bears any weight and responsibility for that, because they should be given credit where it's due. And there is, as much as people do want to downplay it, there is some nobility in the fact that you were able to bring it back to the scale that they were. Spring Finals of 2022 for the LCS was one of the best events that we had ever seen. Worlds 2022, I think, is honestly the golden standard that I've seen for events so far. I don't think any world since that point has actually topped, well, the only one world since that point has topped it. And I can promise you, Worlds this year is definitely not going to top it, given that we're in the studio for all of Swiss stage. But there was real energy coming back from 2021 and 2020 in the COVID era. But the problem is there were many different cracks in the foundation that were already laid well in advance that we kind of knew were coming, that come 2023, it only exacerbated. And honestly, I do fault leadership. I do fault Naz, and I do fault anybody that was making decisions and trying to make compromises, which included moving the LCS to weekdays, one of the most detrimental decisions that has ever happened in the history of the LCS. You saw the LEC last year go to 3 splits, which has been universally hated, as nothing has kind of been adapted. And Riot, well, that's not necessarily like a global LoL esports decision. At the end of the day, for whatever reason, they're not putting people in the right spots below them. The 2 positives that I will I'll go 3 positives I will definitively say. First and foremost, Mark Z is LCS commissioner. I know it's kind of been beat over the head at this point, but honestly, I think it's one of the best things that they've done, because we finally have somebody that can communicate with the audience effectively and has enacted a lot of positive changes and kind of given us a lot of positive momentum over the last year. Even if viewership and other numbers, I'm assuming internal at Riot, don't fully reflect that yet, the sentiment around the league has changed night and day, and that is simply due to the communication that he has given us, even if he didn't enact all the changes that would have gotten us there. And he's fixing a lot of the damage that was caused before him. Second good change, Swiss stage. I thoroughly enjoy Swiss stage at Worlds, but I don't think it's really incrementally that much better than groups. I think it's better than the old system because the old system was flawed and for the longest time they refused to do anything about it. So while it is still a good thing, kind of tapered a little bit. And then the final one is MSI. I think the massive changes that were needed for MSI that were enacted in 2023 are some of the best that we've ever seen in LoL Esports. That tournament has risen in popularity amongst the entire community and has rebounded from what was a best of one snooze fest for so many people to one of their favorite moments of the year, even if Worlds obviously still holds that crown. The problem, though, when talking about all this is it doesn't feel like there was major change, no? Like, Esports winner still impacted League of Legends fully, and I do fault everybody involved, from teams to Riot to like literally everybody in the ecosystem that had any sort of decision making or control power, for not mitigating what was going to inevitably be the fall off. Yes, the framework was set in place many years ago on how this whole thing operates, which we are finally getting a change next year, but it was set up to fail based on that model. And it is the job of leadership to identify as early as possible that something is not working and fix it. And they didn't. They only continued the problem. For Nas specifically, when you look at the last public interview that she had, it was with Travis and with John Needham a year and a half ago, explaining how the change to weekdays was good and pretty much just apologizing for many of the issues that League of Legends specifically had. After that, we only saw John Needham. We never saw Nas again. Now, whether that was John's decision to bear the weight of that for the sake of everybody else, because maybe Nas couldn't answer the questions that John would specifically have, Nas's presence in the space evaporated very quickly, at least from the outside in. If anything was done internally and she had any sway in things, we don't know that as the general public. But one thing we do know is who's going to be replacing her, at least operationally. And that is Chris Greeley, who's the former LCS commissioner. While Nas was on sabbatical for the last 5 months, Chris apparently was performing the role for her in her absence. Now, whether he is just assuming this role in the interim or whether he is actually going to be it full time, we don't know. I'm assuming Riot will come out and make some sort of post or announcement at some point. Nas can't be the one to announce that. That would be a very weird thing for that to be. It still feels like things are kind of up in the air. But we do have to talk about Chris and John. And I say this knowing that there is a heavy chance that Chris will probably end up watching this. And full disclosure for the audience, I have talked to Chris Greeley a few times now. A few times at Worlds back in 2022. Once at LCS Finals in New Jersey back in 2023. And while I've had nothing but positive interactions with him as an individual, we are talking about the decisions that were being made and the decisions that have led us to where we are right now for the LCS under his guise and leadership. This is where things always get awkward, and I never know how much I should lambast. Chris Greeley took over as LCS commissioner whenever the LCS franchised, and it is no failure that franchising failed in League of Legends. It failed horrendously in the LCS. Now, there are going to be people that say, oh, franchising was set up to fail from the beginning. No, I personally believe that franchising can work if done right. If all of the owners are involved, if Riot's involved, and everybody's on the same page, you can actually use the money that was injected into the scene to grow this pretty heavily. But it was spent wrong. Our time, our resources, everything were spent wrong. We didn't stop bleeding viewership. We did nothing to grow fandom. We did nothing to prepare ourselves for the next generation. As players like Doublelift and Bjergsen, we knew they would eventually move on from the game. We'd already seen old stars move on, like Dyrus and others, that you got to be able to pass the torch, and we did not do that. From the business side of things, we became overly reliant on sponsorship revenue, and whenever the ad sales market dropped, guess what? So did the entire esport. We were not insulated from any of the problems that came with that. And as Chris was promoted to head of LoL Esports in the Americas and New Zealand, quite honestly, we have kind of seen the reduction even further. We are now only getting one roadshow each and every year. And that roadshow is also in Los Angeles. Planning has gone out the goddamn window. We don't know in advance anything for any event across global LoL Esports and LCS. The fact that we don't know where Worlds is at next year is already a problem. The fact that we don't know where MSI next year is at is a problem. Mark Z is picking up the scraps of damage that was done prior to this. And Chris does bear a lot of the responsibility for that. So I'd be lying to you if I said that I wasn't nervous about the current state of leadership for LoL Esports with Nas leaving. Now, there is a sentiment that I have seen, and I do understand, of people saying that both John Needham and Chris should realistically go with Nas, and Riot should just overhaul leadership within their entire esports department. There are two things I would note with this, and I know this is probably going to shock many people with me saying this, but I would not remove them from their roles. John Needham has already put out one of the most sweeping changes to the LoL esports ecosystem, including the reduction of teams in both the LCS and CB LoL in an attempt to consolidate all of LoL esports down to less teams so that the ecosystem is more sustainable and push towards in-game revenue as a way to drive money for the leagues rather than just sponsorships, which is unanimously a good decision. We do need that. That needs to happen. We've known that, and they are very late on doing this, sure, but it had to happen. I do not want to see more changes in leadership amidst this ongoing process of renegotiating with owners and figuring out what the future looks like. That would not be a good idea and would throw a chaos bomb into all of this when it's already hard enough as is. What I would like to see happen is I would like to see John Needham and Chris stay on board, stay with the project, and get us through the initial hurdles of getting into this new system. And once this new system is in place, then I think it's time for new leadership. Anybody that is connected with the product that has made leadership decisions over the last 5 to 6 years that has led us to this point where we have been collapsing from the North American standpoint, where it feels like Worlds, even this year, is now being affected by budgets, that we are scaling back there whenever we've been told for years that international LoL esports is stronger than it's ever been, yet you're hosting all the way through Swiss stage in a 300-person arena. That's unacceptable. And the leadership that allowed that to happen should be held responsible, just not yet. I know this video might make me some enemies within Riot and within the LoL esports space, but I've never been one to hold back on my feelings, and I'm the guy that talks about LoL esports business a lot. Feels like I have to be honest here. The honest to God truth is that we do need changes in leadership. We need to see this esports grow, and barring the blessing of Faker being on top of the world right now, it doesn't feel like we're growing beyond that. And there are problems that we have known that have existed for years now that are just finally getting addressed. Riot's moving at too slow of a pace. And maybe that's because the people that are in leadership are not pushing hard enough. Maybe there's too much red tape, of which we will never know. And you know what? That would undermine this entire video. And I understand that there are portions of this that simply we will not know as the general public. But when Riot has promised to be more open and honest with communication, and it's been a year since we've heard from them outside of written articles, they refuse to talk to the press. They refuse to talk to anybody else that isn't a prearranged meeting with Travis, as Travis likely pesters them to finally release some sort of statement or say anything. It feels like we are falling behind and we are playing catch up to try and get this esport to where we want it to be and where it can grow long term. We'll get there eventually, but we're not there yet. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.